Next question today. David, as far as the 2020 Democratic primary campaign goes, are Democrats better off going hard left or appealing to moderates for the purpose of ultimately defeating Trump in 2020? Excellent question. And the answer to me is so clear that I don't want to equivocate in any way. Appealing to moderates has never been a good strategy, and it has never demonstrably worked at the national level. Now, we can separate this out from particular districts or even state Senate seats, which are the voting public is an entire state, is what I'm trying to say. It's the wrong approach to even be thinking in these terms, though. And that's what really scares me. Democrats shouldn't calculate, should we go hard left or should we deliberately go to the middle in order to defeat Donald Trump in 2020 or for whatever particular reason. Democrats and people who are voting in Democratic primaries and people who are voting in general should vote for who they want to vote for on the basis of how those individuals line up with their beliefs. And it's perfectly reasoned to think about how those individuals would fare in a national campaign. Who can avoid mistakes? Who can handle gaffes? Who can deal with attack opposition research? Those are the questions that need to be asked, not let's calculate where on the political spectrum we want to pick someone with the idea of bringing in as many moderates and center rightists as possible who might be disaffected by Donald Trump or whoever is the Republican that we are running against. Pick the person that you believe is best suited for a national campaign and whose politics align with yours. Make that person the nominee, and then they can run against Trump. And the question is not to calculate who's going to do better against Trump based on are they center or center left or far further left. The question is, who is it that actually represents the views of Americans? And what we know from every single poll that fairly asks Americans about their political positions, we know that Americans are well to the left of the elected officials that are representing us. When you fairly go to people and say, do you think that the government has a basic duty to provide a sort of starter, at least a starter level of care to everybody, regardless of ability to pay? Overwhelmingly, 2/3 to 80% of Americans, depending on the poll, say, yeah, I think that's something that should happen. Now, when you politicize it in the way that it gets politicized, do you want the government taking over healthcare in a socialist manner? Of course, people start to say, oh, no, I don't want that. But on the issues, when asked fairly, income inequality, healthcare, net neutrality, whatever, the country has moved to the left and our politicians have not. So the question is not let's calculate left, center, middle, center, left, or whatever. Let's go through the primary process, supporting the people whose views reflect our views. Let's see who avoid mistakes and who can deal with the gaffes and the stumbles. And people will start to emerge as leaders, and we will see whether they are going to be able to handle the attacks that no doubt they will be presented with if they are the Democratic nominee. So the calculation that we need to make is not one of what will moderates and disaffected Republicans like. Now, let's put aside for a second that I believe this is the wrong question altogether. The idea of running to the center has never worked, okay? There's this idea that if we, as Democrats, progressives, leftists, whatever, pick someone that is closer to the center, we will pick up centrists and we'll win because someone will run numbers and say, you know, if we get just 3 additional percentage points of the independent vote, Republicans can't win or whatever. At the national level, this just haven't worked, okay? I would argue that save for conservative districts, Democrats running to the center is a disastrous strategy. There are House elections, okay, where we make the calculation and we say, okay, what kind of Democrat can win in Virginia? That's a different type of Democrat than the Democrat that can win in coastal California or in Massachusetts, for example. But the primary process already sorts that out. Nationally, this ultimately comes down to personality, communicating ideas well, staving off attacks from the other side, and avoiding scandals. So we might as well just put somebody in whose politics match those of the leftist voters that are making the decision here, and of Americans more broadly. And those have moved to the left, as I mentioned, on just about every issue, taxing the rich to pay for things. I mentioned healthcare already, seriously dealing with climate change, campaign finance, staying out of places that aren't our business around the world. Pick the person that appeals to you on policy and likability, which we know for the Democratic primary voters is someone that is further left of center than many of the people that we often hear suggested, as we've got to run to the middle to bring people from the other side over. It hasn't worked. It's not a defensible strategy. Let's stop pretending that it is.